it's just so utterly preposterous. I mean, two of the things they complain about are literally criticisms of Trudeau. And like, if I can't criticize a standing prime minister in my own country, there is something seriously wrong. One of them was his chief of staff. One of them was the city councillor. One of them was the trans issue that we discussed. One of them I criticized Sports Illustrated for presenting a very obese cover model, and I said that as far as I was concerned, she wasn't beautiful, and that no amount of authoritarian compassion was going to convince me otherwise. And the other reason that I think Canadians got mad at that, and I think people in general, is that they think I'm being mean. You know, and you should be nice. And first of all, I'm not exactly so sure that you should be nice all the time. I think we as a culture have got ourselves into an awful lot of trouble by being a little bit too nice. Like, I'm not so sure. I'll give you an example of that. So Nicola Sturgeon, who was the former Prime Minister of Scotland, said, any man who says that he's a woman is a woman. You think, well, that's pretty nice. If the guy wants to be a woman, well, we can just go, what harm could it do?
Yeah,
and then the serial sexual slayers in prisons decided that maybe they were women, because maybe then they could go to women's prisons. And, you know, if you don't think that a serial sexual killer will manipulate his image to get access to women, you are a complete blithering bloody idiot. And of course, that's exactly what happened in Scotland.
Oh, yeah.
And so Sturgeon was called out on her pathological compassion, and that was one of the things that led to her resignation. It's like, tolerance beyond a certain level is 100% absolutely, incontrovertibly a vice. And when tolerance has got to the point where it's a vice, then it's time to not be so nice.
When you say a vice, what do you mean?
That's a very good question. You know, what is a vice exactly? Well, a vice is a pattern of behavior that, if indulged in, especially repeatedly, leads to nothing but negative consequences, even by the self-definition of the person engaging in the vice. And so, look, excess alcohol use tends to be a vice.
Yeah.
Well, why? Okay. How do you diagnose alcoholism as a pathology? Well, the first thing you do is you look at amount and frequency, let's say, but that's not enough. It has to be a high amount, frequently, that causes substantial disruption to one or more important domains of life. So if you're wondering whether you're drinking too much, you think, well, is it compromising your health? Are your friends starting to object? Have you got in trouble with the law?
Is your wife mad?
Right, exactly. So is the behavior starting to produce negative consequences, even by your definition, or perhaps even more importantly by your definition? Then you'd say, well, any behavior that tends to be quite entertaining in the short term, but let's say not so good socially or in the long term, that's a vice. And we all know that. You know, there's lots of things, like drinking is a great example. It's an absolute bloody blast, especially if you like alcohol. But, you know, when I was a kid, I used to drink a fair bit, and I quit when I was about 24, 25, maybe a little later than that. And, you know, I was out 3 or 4 times a week having just a fine time.
Drinking beer or whiskey?
Yeah. Usually beer. I like beer a lot, but whatever was available, fundamentally.
Anything wet.
Yeah. And at some point, especially as my professional career developed, I realized essentially, and this is also when I started my permanent relationship with Tammy, I thought, you know, the only time I really do things I regret is when I'm drinking.
Yeah.
You know,
Same.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Well, that's a vice, man. It's like, it's not good for you. And especially not good if you're trying to aim up. Like, you couldn't do what you're doing.
No,
How old are you? You'd die at 27. Like, you would have died at 27.
That's when most people die, you know, that have
and they die from vices generally, you know.
You were telling me that last time, one of the last times that we spoke.